The idea that our government has been colluding with aliens sounds crazy, but what if it's true? Follow me down the rabbit hole about Valiant Thor. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the rabbit hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we are talking about Valiant Thor. So, as promised, I know I told you guys we were going to talk about it, so here we are. Thank you, DJ and Sarah, for suggesting this. It kind of goes along with our UFO, our bonus episode that we did a week and a half ago. So let's jump in. So on March 16th, 1957 at 8 a.m., a 300-foot long, 21-foot tall spacecraft touched down in Alexandria, Virginia. This is about 20 minutes from the White House. But honestly, you wouldn't know that being in Alexandria because it's kind of like a quiet little town. So 2 police officers showed up on the scene. They're like, what the heck is this thing? So as the door opened to the craft, the officers obviously drew their guns. They had no idea what they're about to encounter. They want to protect themselves. I don't blame them at all. And what they saw was this totally normal looking human-like man step out. And he was about, like 6 feet tall, brown hair, brown eyes, incredibly handsome. And he just smiled and waved hello at the officers. And it seemed like they were completely disarmed by this. They were like, yeah, seems like a totally normal guy, right? Seems harmless. He told the police in clear English that he needed to talk to the President of the United States. At the time, that was President Dwight D. Eisenhower. And apparently, he conveys all this information to these police officers telepathically. The police don't even question it. They're like, yep, cool. And I'm wondering if they're not questioning this because if he's conveying all this information telepathically, he's probably also conveying his motives and like his feelings he's having to them telepathically, and so they can feel that he's not a threat, that he's not dangerous, and that he's here for a very important thing. They need to take him to the Pentagon. So the police load him in the back of their patrol car and they take him directly to the Pentagon. They like just drive to the Pentagon. Granted, it's not that far away, but it just seems very odd. They're like, yep, let's go, and they just drive over. While on their way to the Pentagon, another officer from the Alexandria Police Department calls the Pentagon to alert them to what's going on. They're like, obviously, something weird's going to happen. We've got these 2 guys. They're bringing this alien, this extraterrestrial to you guys. The man who took the call was Harley Andrew Byrd. So Harley Andrew Byrd was the nephew of Admiral Richard Byrd, who we talked about in the Antarctica episode, part 2. He was the one that found the entrance to the center of the Earth and flew in and found an advanced civilization in there. So if you kind of remember that. And Harley Byrd was a key player in Project Blue Book, which was a project that studied UFOs. And we touched on Project Blue Book in the Hangar 18 episode. So trying to put all the pieces of all the episodes here together for you. And it seems like Harley for sure was the person to handle the situation, because this is something that obviously the Alexandria Police Department was not equipped to handle. Val, which is short for Valiant Thor, was greeted by the Secretary of Defense, who at the time was Charles Irwin Wilson. And then 6 armed guards just escorted him through the Pentagon to an elevator that went below ground to like the basement. Then they got into this secret underground train subway thing, which connected to the White House, and they went to the White House. Apparently, this subway doesn't exist, but then again, that's what they say about the tunnels under the Denver airport too. So I believe 100% there's a tunnel that connects the White House and the Pentagon. It just makes sense, let's be honest. When they get to the White House, he's taken directly to the Oval Office, and President Eisenhower is super excited to meet Val. He's like really happy. And even like Vice President Richard Nixon walked in and he greeted Val like he was just some old buddy that he's known forever. So both of them were like, "Hey man, cool, welcome. Like, let's talk about some things that you need to talk to us about." I don't think it's that easy for anybody to get a meeting with the president and the vice president of the United States. But he did. And mind you, this is all happening about 9 months before NASA was founded, and just a few months before Sputnik, the Soviet Union satellite, was launched into orbit. Basically, after Sputniks 1 and 2 were launched, there was lots of paranoia about Russia putting weapons in space, and like we were in the Cold War, nobody really understood what could be put into space, what couldn't be put into space, and there was a lot of panic, basically, is what came down to. And Eisenhower was demanding action. And we know that after NASA was launched, they're responsible for creating so many different things that advanced our civilization for sure. So they created like freeze-dried food, memory foam mattresses, so many things. In fact, NASA has like 2,600 patents, a lot of them. And it seemed like once they were established, they started creating things and advancing things incredibly fast. Like suspiciously fast. But maybe that's because of the deal that Val made with President Eisenhower. So while he's talking to Eisenhower in this very first meeting that they're having, he explains that he was from the planet of Venus and he was sent to Earth from the High Council. The reason he was sent is because it is of the utmost importance that the world disarms their nukes. And he was there to basically help advance technology in return for disarming all nukes. And Eisenhower needed to be the person to kind of coordinate that with the whole world. He also let Eisenhower know that the council instructed him to stay on Earth for 3 years. And honestly, President Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon, they were pretty receptive to Val's message. They were like, yeah, of course. Okay, cool. And then the president was like, I would love to keep you here as like my friend, my special guest. Will you stay in the Pentagon? And Val was like, yeah, sure, cool. I'd love to stay in the Pentagon. So they put him into like a VIP status and they gave him this like really cool, fully furnished apartment in the Pentagon, which I didn't know they had apartments in the Pentagon. I'm sure that's one of those underground, lower level things that they do there. And Val wasn't like a prisoner. He could come and go as he pleased, and he was true to his word. He started to help them out. He basically became a science experiment, and he didn't have any issues with this. The scientists, they would run tests on him. They ran tests on his suit. When he first got there, he was in this like silver and gold, like almost like painted on type suit, and it didn't seem like it had any openings or any way to get in and out of it. So typically if you see like a jumpsuit or something like that, you would see a zipper or it would be stretchy. This looked like it was painted onto his perfectly sculpted body, but it wasn't, because apparently he could get out of it. And they started running tests on it. In fact, they found that it was completely impenetrable. So they used a laser, they used a diamond drill, they poured acid on it, they shot at it with like high-powered machine guns. Literally nothing destroyed this suit. They ended up calling it the Miracle Garment because it covered this 6-foot-tall, like ripped dude. And the whole suit, including the boots, only weighed about 6 ounces. And it was completely impenetrable. I want one of those suits for sure. But I'm sure you're kind of questioning the same thing I was questioning, is like, why did Val know he could trust Eisenhower? And why did Eisenhower just like believe Valiant Thor, right? Like, what kind of weird relationship they both were like, yep, this is the person I need to talk to. And Eisenhower being so open to just like believing this alien. Well, Eisenhower actually has a bit of a history with extraterrestrials. So 3 years earlier, in 1954, he was at this dinner in Palm Springs. He was on vacation. He went to this dinner. After dinner, he excused himself unexpectedly, and he didn't return to his room until the next morning. It is said that he was rushed off to this like appointment of sorts. And he was apparently called to the Edwards Air Force Base, which was about 2 hours away from Palm Springs. And there he met with two aliens. And they were hoping to strike a deal. These aliens did look like human aliens. And then this was like the first of several meetings. He had a couple meetings. But these first guys, they just looked like Nordic looking guys, you know? When he finally returned to the ranch he was staying at, he told everyone that he had a dental emergency because he chipped his tooth on a chicken wing at dinner and he had rushed off to the dentist. But mind you, he didn't return until the next morning, so that seems a little out there. But his disappearance was widely reported. People were freaking out about it. The Associated Press even reported that he died, which obviously wasn't true, but it was big news. After several meetings, and the first one was with human looking aliens, the others were with gray looking aliens. They brokered this deal, and it was called the Greada Treaty. The terms of the treaty stated that the aliens would give the US some of their advanced technology, and in exchange, they would be abducting some humans for experimentation. And Eisenhower was like super into it. He's like, yep, take whoever, I don't care. Would you mind just like giving us the names of the people that you're taking? That way, like, we can just keep track. And honestly, this makes a lot of sense because it was the Cold War era, so he wanted to be ahead of the Soviets in technology. And after this deal was supposedly brokered, we saw this uptick in alien abductions or people reporting that they were abducted by aliens. So I think Val was aware that Eisenhower may or may not have brokered this treaty, and they could just trust each other. And they knew it. They knew they could trust each other. So anyway, President Eisenhower asked Val if he would attend a meeting with him at Howard Menger's house in New Jersey. This was a gathering of like different people that advised the president on UFO matters. It wasn't big. It was kind of this like impromptu, really like backwoods UFO convention of sorts. And of course, Val agreed. He was like, yep, no problem. As long as I can bring along my crew. And his crew, they have like totally average human names. So he had Dawn, Jill, and Tanya were his crew. And his name's Valiant Thor. I'm like, okay, well, did you just pick up some random people and they decided to be your crew? Anyways, while they were there, they kind of had to show off for the group. I think it was like a way of proving that they really were aliens because they looked so human-like. So they went as far as like speaking any human language that anybody asked for, but they spoke it perfectly, like fluent. They knew the slang, they knew the pronunciation, everything about it. In any language that somebody could come up with, they could speak it. At this meeting, an Air Force photographer named August Roberts took pictures of Val and his crew. And this is crucial because this leads to the book that was written about him. This leads to so much, and it kind of lends credibility to the story because you can still find these pictures online. The problem is Val and his crew look very human, so you have no idea if it's just like random pictures of random people or if it's pictures of aliens. At this meeting, he told the group that they could end world hunger, they could cure diseases, they could end all war. All they needed was to get rid of nuclear weapons. This was Val's task, right? His mission was to get rid of the nukes of the world. And you know what Eisenhower's response was? The world just isn't ready yet. We can't make these drastic changes because the world can't handle it. Which I don't necessarily believe. If you can end world hunger, cure diseases, end all war. But you know the problem? Diseases, hunger, and war bring money to people. Anyway, that's not this conspiracy. That's a whole nother conspiracy. But this is when Val realized that he just could not complete his mission alone. And I think he also realized that he wasn't going to complete his mission in the 3-year time frame that he had. So he needed to recruit some open-minded human to convince the other humans and to continue to spread the word that they need to denuclearize the world. So enter Dr. Frank Stranges. So Frank Stranges is an author and Christian minister. He has degrees or PhDs in psychology, criminology, and theology. And he has been an investigator, U.S. Marshal, and he also has this love for UFOs. He actually has written several books about how UFOs appear in the Bible. So he's kind of like the perfect person to be pushing this narrative. Frank first hears about Val because the photographer from the meeting, August Roberts, calls Frank up and he's like, "You're never going to believe this. I need to come over to your house and show you these pictures. I just met a UFO, or an alien, excuse me." And at first, Frank, rightfully so, was like kind of excited, but also was like, there's no way this guy's a real life alien. But Roberts convinces him, and Frank starts using the pictures that Roberts gives him in his lectures. He gave one of his lectures in Washington, D.C., and afterwards a woman named Nancy Warren came up to Frank, held up a Pentagon ID, and asked Frank if he wanted to meet the man in the pictures. So, yes. The answer was emphatically yes. He for sure wanted to meet the man that was in the pictures. So the next morning, Nancy picks Frank up at his hotel, takes him to the Pentagon, where they go in this like side entrance, and he leads them down this hall. They go past this checkpoint where Frank like didn't have to show an ID or any credentials, like nothing. They just like kept going. At no point did he have to like prove who he was. I'm wondering if it's because like Nancy Warren must have been pretty well known, and or Val got in everybody's heads and said, "This guy's fine, just let him on through." So Nancy leads him to this door, and she kind of like nods for Frank to just like go inside. And Val is waiting for him on the other side. And he seems to kind of like know everything about Frank. He even tells Frank things like he didn't know about himself that he like later went and verified with his parents, and they were true. And Val tells Frank, "I need your help." Of course, Frank was like, why me? Like, what do you need? And Val explained that he needed someone that was both open-minded to the idea of like aliens and UFOs, but also had this devout faith. Frank's faith happened to be Christian, but it kind of worked out because Frank had been writing these books about how you can see references to UFOs in the Bible. And Val continued that Jesus was actually an extraterrestrial and that God was displeased with mankind, but that they could save it, that he's not complete, like he hasn't lost all hope yet, but Frank needs to help get the word out and have the world, quote, turn to the Lord, end quote. For his help, Val would unlock the secrets of the universe to Frank. Frank and Val actually worked really closely for the next couple years until Val left, but they would work closely for the rest of Frank's life, it seems. During the same time, Val was continuing to work with the president, but that was just not going well because he convinced Eisenhower to call a meeting with the United Nations to begin the process of Earth joining this intergalactic community a couple of times. But every time that this was going to happen, the CIA or the DOD or the Joint Chiefs of Staff or whatever, they would interfere because their concern was that we would lose military supremacy, which, like, if you're joining an intergalactic community, wouldn't they be your allies and they would help us with that? But also, they were concerned that the people would follow Val. Like, if they knew about Valiant Thor, they would follow him instead of the world leaders that we have in place already. They were worried about losing control and like mass chaos ensuing. So eventually, Val's time kind of came to an end on March 16th of 1960. His mission was over and he had to go home. He had instructed Frank to keep doing his work, keep doing what you're doing, keep putting the message out there, but it's going to be really hard. People are going to try to discredit you. People aren't going to believe you. This is going to be really hard work. And also, people are going to threaten your life. So really pay attention to that because this is dangerous. And at the same time, it seems like Eisenhower did try to warn us about Valiant Thor's existence and his mission, because in his farewell speech in 1961, so just a year after Val left us, he told us to beware of the establishment of a military industrial complex and that creating a weapons industry would be pretty dangerous, and that we couldn't allow war to become profitable. This all seems a bit strange coming from Eisenhower because he was elected to the presidency for being a war hero. He was a 5-star general that led troops to victory in World War II. Dude knows a thing or two about being in the military, weapons, the industrial complex, like the whole thing. And he was like, whoa, we better pump the brakes on that, everyone. Just, be careful. So I think that Eisenhower must have believed Val and wanted to help him and really disarm the world of nukes, but I don't know, maybe the deep state just wouldn't let him. But Val wasn't wrong about people threatening Frank Strange's life. In fact, he was spot on, because in 1967, Val was giving a speech in Germany, and he was asked for an interview with this Italian magazine. So the reporter and the photographer, they met with him at this restaurant. They were very intimidating men. And they were just grilling Frank about Valiant Thor and all of these claims that Frank was making. And then at one point, Frank got this phone call. So he gets up, he goes to like the hostess stand or wherever the phone is. He talks to whoever's on the other line. I don't even know any details about the phone call. It doesn't matter. When he comes back to his table, the two men are gone. Their plates aren't there. It's almost as if they were never there. There's no sign that they were ever there. The only thing that's left on this table is Frank's soup. And before he had gotten up for the phone call, he was eating his soup. So he knew like what it had tasted like. He took another bite and all of a sudden it tasted like really gritty, like not good. And he realized in that moment that his food had been poisoned, because he started not feeling good quickly. Luckily, his interpreter was sitting at a nearby table, and he helped Frank get back to his hotel room. By the time they got there, Frank was like coughing up blood. This poison was working fast, and it was going to kill him. Then something strange kind of happened. The interpreter pulls out this vial of powder and stirs it into this glass of water and gives it to Frank. Now, if I had just been poisoned, I'm not sure that I'd be too keen on drinking some unknown substance, but Frank, just goes for it, man. He's like, I don't know you, but cool, let's do it. Then he falls into this really deep sleep, and he wakes up, a while later, and he's totally fine. So Frank, looks at this interpreter guy and was like, dude, how did you know that you're going to have to save my life? And the guy, really just didn't really know. He said that before Frank arrived in Germany, he got a call, told him to take this powder from his lab because he was a medical student at the time and bring it with him to the meeting. And about that time is when the phone rang in his hotel room. Frank answers it, and Valiant Thor is on the other line. And he's like, dude, I told you to be careful that people would threaten your life or try to kill you, and here you are just not being careful. You're just taking meetings with random people. He said you need to be really, really careful for the rest of your trip to Germany, and we'll be in contact again. About 7 months later, Frank receives another call telling him to go to San Diego. So he does. He gets on a plane, goes to San Diego, no problem. Val is just hanging out in baggage claim, just waiting for Frank to get off the plane. Of course, they recognize each other right away. He's like, oh, cool. Hey, man. They get in a car. They head south. They go to San Felipe, Mexico. There, they board a boat, and they just head out to sea. And that's when Frank sees it. He sees Val's spacecraft. When he gets on the craft, he goes through this sanitation, sterilization type situation. It's almost like a shower without it being a shower. He was told to get completely naked. They send him through this kind of like what you would see in the movies. And then they put on this jumpsuit. And I'm wondering if it's very similar to the jumpsuit that Val was wearing when he first showed up. But that's unknown. Anyway, Val gives Frank a tour of the whole craft. He sees, an auditorium and a media area and all these different things. He's blown away. He has this incredible meal that he's food he's never had before because it's not Earth food, it's space food, and he's just like living his best life. He takes a nap, he has a fantastic sleep. He's on top of the world. Then they all gather, so Val, his crew of the 3 people, and Frank, they all gather in this like viewing area. And through this projector of sorts, they can see anything that's happening anywhere in the world right now. So they turn on the channel that is showing Bobby Kennedy giving a speech in Los Angeles. Apparently, Bobby Kennedy and Valiant Thor have some sort of relationship, and Bobby at one point asked Val, hey, do you think I will be president one day? And Val's like, yes, in 4 years you should go for president, but don't do it now because you need to stay out of the limelight for a little while. You need to just keep it low key, stay out of the limelight, and then in 4 years run for the president and you'll make it. Bobby obviously did not listen because here he is giving a speech in Los Angeles. As he walks off stage, they all watch and he's assassinated. It's reported that one of the crew members looks at Val and said, too bad he didn't listen to you, Val. So, I don't know. Seems like Valiant Thor knew that Bobby Kennedy was going to get assassinated. But throughout Frank's life, Val had to save him several times. And I'm not sure why Val didn't save Bobby Kennedy. Because, like, if he keeps saving Frank, why didn't he save Bobby? I don't know the answer to that. All I know is one time Frank was on his way to meet Val and he was shoved in the back of a car and taken out to the desert where he was nearly beaten to death. But Val and Dawn showed up and they put a stop to it. They're like, nope. And they saved Frank's life. Another time, while he was on his honeymoon with his wife, they were run off the road by this like black car. Frank broke his neck and both of his hips, and he was in the hospital. The doctors were thinking that they were going to lose him. They're like, there's no way this guy's going to live. Val shows up and heals him instantly, and dude walks out of the hospital the same day. Could you imagine being a doctor on Frank's service and being like, this guy's going to die. I don't know what we're going to do. And he just like gets up and walks out like totally healed. That would freak me out. But as far as we know, Val's ship is still here. It's parked just like on the shore of Lake Mead in Nevada, and it's just cloaked, and several people know about it. There's like apparently like 2,000 people in the government that know that this spacecraft is there, and nobody's doing anything about it. It's just hanging out. And Frank has since died. He is no longer with us. But you can still find his book, Stranger at the Pentagon, which is just all about his time with Valiant Thor and Valiant Thor's story and everything that you might want to know about that. But there's plenty of people that have said that this is true. There's pictures of Valiant Thor in the world. Even President Eisenhower's granddaughter came forward and was like, yep, he talked to aliens, he talked to Valiant Thor. Just, I don't know. This is crazy. I would love to meet an alien. If there's an alien listening to my podcast, please come and let me meet you. But, of course, my friends, until next week, you stay skeptical, and I will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.